Hey, Xiaowei.
Hi, team.
Hi, Xiaowei. So good to see you. How are
Yeah,
you?
me too. I'm good. How are
I'm
you?
all right.
Yeah.
How's your family back home?
Yeah. My family is good.
How are your studies going?
I don't know. I'm not feeling good when I'm at home.
I miss you. I wish I,
Me too. Me
I wish I
too.
was teaching a class with you.
Yeah, in the summer, but the summer class is also turned to the online courses.
Until, yeah, so long as it's necessary, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So if it stops being necessary for some people, then we will have physical classes.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
That's good.
yeah, yeah.
I want
Uh,
to go back to the campus.
yeah, so do I. Um,
Yeah.
where do you live, Xiaowei?
Chinatown.
Right. Well, it must be very quiet there.
Yeah. Next to Hong Kong grocery store.
Oh, yeah, I know it.
Yeah.
Yeah. In Moonta Place.
Yeah. Grove
Yeah.
Street. Grove Street.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. Okay. Hey, you look better in the camera than I do.
Oh, really?
Yeah, you look much more attractive than me.
Oh, no.
No, it's terrific. It's good to see you. You look well. You look
Yeah.
well. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Can you
Thank
see the
you.
PowerPoint?
Yeah, I can see that.
Good. Then I can stop worrying, huh?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, now, what are you taking? You're still doing financial analysis?
No, here's multiple courses: data mining, business intelligence, and
Oh,
financial analysis. Too
oh.
many homework.
That- That's a lot of courses, and none of them are public policy courses.
Yeah. I do
Oh.
not have any policy courses in this mini.
Yeah, no, I know. Well, the first thing people say when we start the next semester is, I talk at public finance and I say, so how good, big should government be? And they say, aha, at last we have some policy. Hi, hi, Rachel. Hi, Mickey. Miss you guys.
Yeah, I miss you too, Tim.
Yeah. So, uh, and but 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 the online delivery is going okay, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I just miss like people in general.
Yes.
I know. Well, I've got to see my physiotherapist this afternoon, and I'm going to tell her when I get there. This feels more like going on a date because I haven't seen anyone for so long.
I know.
But no, I'm looking forward to it, and I don't always. I hope you guys are getting some exercise, are you?
Trying.
Yeah.
Not as I should. But...
Yeah. Well,
Trying.
even the Prime Minister says you're entitled to go and get some exercise, right?
Mm-hmm.
yeah. Yeah.
So I'm riding my bike every day.
Oh, nice.
Oh,
Yeah.
really?
Where?
Where?
Well, what I do is, the parade ends at the foothills, so there's a bit of a rise up the parade. So I ride up to the top of that twice.
Hmm.
Yeah. So I know when I get to the school, it's going to really start to hurt. No, it's good for you. Now, this is odd. I've got 3 of my best writers that have zoomed in. The people who least need the course, the class, are the ones that have turned up.
I'm not sure. Probably they're finishing some assignments
Yeah, we have an assignment due tonight.
tonight. Yeah.
That's okay. We'll wait a minute or two and then we'll get started because people can just join in.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna go get some water. I'll be right back.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Mickey, I never got to ask you how you said something to me about Brisbane.
Yes. What about Brisbane?
Do you like Brisbane? Do you prefer it to Adelaide?
Oh well, when I got to Brisbane, it was hot, like the Philippines.
Oh, yes.
I was
Yeah, I know.
sweating a lot.
Yeah.
um, yeah, Brisbane is quite good. I'm not sure though. Because when we were there, it was raining a lot, so I didn't get a chance to walk around.
Did you see the river though?
Yes, definitely.
The river's beautiful, huh?
Uh, yes. I mean, it's beautiful at night.
Good. Yeah. Hello, Darwin. Hello, Suhas. Good to see
Yeah,
both
hi.
of you. Yeah.
It,
It's
it's
amazing how
very,
you can see and talk to so many people and still feel lonely, isn't it?
yeah, because it's very tough time.
Yeah. It's good for you. All right. Well, I think 5's enough for us to get going. And if others join, good luck. Now, a couple of things. Hey, love the background, Darwin. A couple of things.
Professor, I have my one request, small request. I have some broadband issues. Can I switch off my video?
Can you what? I'm sorry?
Can I switch off my video? Can I stop?
Yeah, sure. Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So this is being recorded, but more importantly, I've asked for the presentation to be put up on the website, so you don't have to take any notes or anything like that. Just I'll just go through it. Same old rules, you know. You just interrupt whenever you want to, yeah. And we'll talk about the hardest thing you do in public policy and the thing that you get rewarded the most for is because people who can write, they're like the Tasmanian tiger. There's not a lot of them, and everyone needs them, right? Just about extinct, people who can write. So, and by the way, tell me if anything goes wrong technically here, okay? Yeah? And so we'll just run through some things. So here we go. So the first thing you need to do, and it's one thing that's interesting, it's from policy analytics. A couple of you found the final assignment where you had to take a side quite difficult, because I think you're not used to writing things where everything depends upon you persuading somebody of something, right? And so you can't say, well, this has got some merit, but that's got some merit too. I mean, if you just imagine that you're writing a document for a cabinet, for a government cabinet meeting, you can't be saying, well, there's 3 arguments here and they're all of equal merit, right? You've actually got to persuade them of something. And to do that, you've got to begin by persuading yourselves of something, right? So you're trying to persuade, you're trying to convince, okay? And this is what your writing tasks in your professional life will be. They will not be analytic like you've been doing with us. You'll actually have to persuade people of something, yeah? To do that, you don't just need an elegant argument. It grieves me to say this, but fine English will not get you there on its own. You need research, you need evidence, yeah? And so it's really important that you articulate what you're going to persuade the person of, right? And you then develop the argument by adding more and more evidence to persuade them of that. And the evidence doesn't have to be just people's journals and articles and so on. It can be anything. And in particular, and we'll talk about this a little bit more later, in particular, it can be data, yeah? But the problem with a lot of people, and you'll find this in data mining and so on, a lot of people, they forget to put the icing on the cake. They think that the data speaks for itself. Now, the data doesn't speak for itself. You might have been, working closely with it for weeks. So you think it speaks for itself, but just think about your reader. Your reader hasn't been anywhere near the data. They don't understand what it's saying. We'll come to that point in a moment. Okay, so here's some steps. And as you can see, it says in no particular order, right? Now, step number 1 is important. Analyze the question and define key terms. You guys are fortunate. You've done strategic planning, so you know how to frame the issue, right? You already have a superior skill that's available to you that is not available to people who have not done that course, yeah? Because they don't know the first thing about how to define the issue, right? So then the second thing is you've actually, now, when it says establish a point of view, the way the human brain works is that we arrive quickly at a point of view often, right? And when we arrive quickly at that point of view, it's a great mistake is as you go, if your faith in that view starts to weaken, is to just cling to that view no matter what. Yeah? I mean, it was John Maynard Keynes who said, when the facts change, I change my mind. What do you do, sir? Yeah? So if the evidence is pointing you in a different direction, follow that direction. Don't just hold on with the grim death to your initial view. Yeah? I'll talk about some of these other things. Step number 7 there may seem a bit of a strange one to you. Write a first draft of the first chapter, or of the whole essay for that matter, and then wait, right? It's really good to let the subconscious do a bit of work here. You write that first draft of the chapter, right? Then you go out and go for a run or go for a walk or do something where you don't have it in front of you. It's amazing how the subconscious starts to rethink the problem. Just let it flow. Don't force it. Just let it flow. And the only thing to do is to, when you go out, is take a little piece of paper and a pencil so that you can write that, because it's amazing how quickly you forget the stuff. But my age is an excuse. You don't have that excuse available to you, but still, you might want to take that that pencil paper, right? Now the rest of the text, the rest of the steps there are self-evident. When it says in no particular order, I'll talk about this a bit more in a moment, but one thing you should think about is elevating step number 12 to somewhere near the start. It's a really good thing to write your conclusion for as soon as you can. Yeah? I'll come back to that. What's happened? Okay. So we're going to have a little example here. The arguments for making it compulsory to wear bicycle helmets. Okay. So the first thing we need to think about when we think about how we're going to research this is what's the dependent variable and what are the independent variables, right? So what's the dependent variable here? It's the costs and benefits of using bike helmets, isn't it? Yeah. So there will be some costs associated with this. There'll be some benefits, and how strong the case is will be a matter of how much you believe the benefits exceed the costs, right? But notice that our topic is not compulsory use of bike helmets. Our topic is whether compulsory use of bike helmets makes sense. So that's our dependent variable. The dependent variable is the one that we're going to explain using the independent variables. Yeah? So what are the independent variables? Well, things like this. We can get some evidence about, do these bike helmets actually work? Yeah? If they do work, do they actually save lives and prevent brain injury? Right? How important are they in predicting the outcome of bike accidents? Like, for instance, if I'm on my bike this afternoon, someone careers into me at 60 k's an hour without braking, it won't matter if I've got a helmet or not, I'll be dead. Yeah? So we need to know this stuff. We need to assemble. These are our independent variables. There are other variables here that are hard to assemble some evidence about. For instance, do people wearing bike helmets have a false sense of security, and are they more prone to taking risks? to be the sort of thing that you'd like to research, right? We'll get to it. Road conditions, how much do they contribute? What about policing of the roads? I mean, if the police are out there fining people for speeding the whole time, maybe that has an impact. So, in other words, we can come back to our dependent variable, which you see how we've made a shift now. The dependent variable is really about bike accidents. So how do the independent variables explain them? And what is the role of helmets in that? You understand? It really helps to separate the two things that help, I reckon, for most people. First of all, to have an explicit thought process about what's the dependent variable here and what are the independent variables. People who don't do that write really boring things like the books like the Government of Victoria. What about it, right? So you're not going to pick up a book that says the Government of Victoria, right? You might pick up a book that says how the land scandals of the 1960s brought down the Government of Victoria. The second has got a title that's about a dependent variable. Yeah? Okay. So now, establishing your point of view, think about what your starting view is, right? My guess is that most of you, your starting view is that people should be required to wear bike helmets, right? So why do I take that view? Well, maybe it's because I ride a bike. Yeah. Maybe I take the view that I don't really like a whole lot of cars congesting up the city. The world would be much better if everyone was on a bike. Yeah. So it started out with some gut feeling. There's nothing wrong with that, but knowing where your view comes from is going to be helpful. Yeah. And then a really good little strategy is to say, well, what would make me resolve from that view? What would make me change that view? What kind of evidence? Because if there's no evidence that will make you change that view, you don't have a view, you just have a faith. Yeah? I mean, if you believe in the Catholic Church, there would have been no evidence on the face of this earth that would have made my mother believe in anything else when she was alive. There could be no evidence that you could dream of that would make her lose her faith in the Catholic Church. Yeah? So, you know, if we were driving into a car park where there was a supermarket and someone backed their car out just in front of the supermarket, she'd zip in there and say, God is good, because she'd think God gave her that car park. So there's nothing you can do to change that sort of view. Okay. But knowing where your view comes from will be helpful to you. And you've seen that phrase down the bottom of the last dot point in our strategic planning context. You're going to confront the facts. You're going to confront them critically. Take notes. Now, note taking. There's two things to do. Really good articles, you're going to need to read twice. I still do it. I'm trying to write something right now, and I've read one of them at least 3 times. So, you know, articles like that Eaglin article that we did in Policy Analytics, this is sort of you're going to need to read it twice. You can take notes the second time, but when you read it the first time, just run that, you know, the little highlighter that you can run over PDFs, just do that. Yeah. But the tough thing to do is don't be like a magpie. Don't go around just picking up all little bits and pieces because they seem nice or they look nice. Think, does this address my question? Even though it's a great point, right? And I fall for this one all the time. Even though it's a great point, that it doesn't actually assist, either contradict or support the argument. That's what I'm looking for. So the whole time you're reading, you need to be thinking about that. Okay. Now, when it comes to data, is people accept data too uncritically. And you remember the example of the shark attacks and the ice creams. Is that, you know, when sales of ice creams go up, shark attacks go up. Now, sharks don't know people are eating ice creams. Just happens that people are eating ice creams when there's times in the summer when there's more people in the water, so the shark attacks will be higher. Yeah. So that's a glib example, but there's lots of examples of this. When you see data that purports to do something, then you need to think about it critically. Now, this is even more hazardous in the era of big data because we don't ever talk about causation anymore. Everything's just associations. Yeah. And so we need to think really hard about whether this association actually makes sense. And the fact that an algorithm has found the association doesn't give it any greater standing whatsoever. No? Now, have a look at that second last dot point there. I see this all the time. Because the author's well known or the publication's well known does not make it true. Yeah. One of the things that I don't like about the kind of financial things and even economics is that there's can be too little room for debate. Economics suffers from, in my judgment, a great deal of orthodoxy. I mean, you can see economic theory unraveling before our eyes at the moment. You know, I mean, Australia's no different from other places. How are we going to pay for all this? Simple. We're going to be printing money. So modern money theory, who's whether they like to admit it or not, is being used here. Now, economics tells you no, not to do that, right? So we mustn't just accept things as being orthodox. Test the views of others, right? And the evidence. Ask yourself why they've come to a particular view. Yeah, I mean, if you read anything, a very famous economist, if you come across Lawrence Summers, he's a famous economist. All he has to do, former US Secretary for the Treasury, all Lawrence Summers has to do is to say, A follows B, which follows C, and everybody believes it. One of the things that I see is very common these days is that people overstep what the data is showing. If you remember, for instance, take you back, if you remember the child protection algorithm, well, that only added about 2% of predictive accuracy to the tools that were in place at the time. Why should it have any more standing? I mean, it's only marginally more accurate for the false positives, and it was actually worse, marginally worse for the false negatives. You know, how sounds the methodology? What are the biases? What are the strengths and weaknesses? Yeah. Now we need to draw up a plan, right? How am I going to answer the questions? This assumes that you've already prepared the questions. Yeah. What do I need to find out? Where's the best place, right? What evidence, you know, those sorts of things. That's pretty straightforward. Yeah. So that's how it looks like, right? Just work through those 5 steps. Yeah. So one of the really good things to do is to set the arguments side by side so you can see what the contest is. For most people, that's just a blur. Yeah. So here's the argument set side by side. The case for making bike helmets compulsory, right? Cycling's dangerous. Cyclists, if car drivers have protections of airbags and seatbelts, cyclists need protection too. Yeah. If a single life is saved by a helmet law, it's worth it, right? And the case for making it compulsory for children is even stronger. It's the case against. We're not arguing that people shouldn't wear them. What we are arguing is that people shouldn't be forced to wear them. The risk of head injury is not sufficient to justify this, that the head injuries that are occurring are very minor in number. And using helmets creates some of its own risks. Cyclists take risks. Helmet laws also have the effect of discouraging cycling. people don't want to buy the helmets or that they don't have them at the time, so they don't cycle as much. Yeah. And once we mandate the use of cycling helmets, is that what we're doing is government is taking over a risk that people should manage for themselves. Okay. So you draw up, they're the arguments against each other. You need to figure out where you stand in that contest. So you ask yourself this question: how will I answer the question? Right? Well, the first thing is you'll be answering the question emphatically, either yes or no, not maybe. Right? What do I know already? Not much. What do I need to find out? Some evidence. Where's the best place to look for it? Data, and for peer-reviewed publications, not Wikipedia, not, you know, bless our souls, but you need to go to peer-reviewed publications. Yeah. By the way, I don't think the President of the United States has done much peer reviewing. Did you hear him telling people to take that drug yesterday? That's unbelievable. It's just unbelievable. Even his own medical advisors are saying there could be health hazards from taking it. I thought I must have been listening to some comedy parody when I was out riding my bike and I heard this come on. And people are so used to it now. You know, I mean, that would be...
I have no comment about
I wasn't demanding one. Anyway, diversion, back onto this. How am I going to structure, right? Now, the best thing you can do for structuring your report is it is not a detective novel, right? People should not have to wait to the last chapter to find out how it turns out. State your view at the start and state it emphatically, and you will find that this is a great organizing principle, because when you do that, everything else that you do will be brought in to support your original view. If you save it up to the end, you'll wander all over the place, and then you'll pick up some of the things that you've been saying to support a view at the end. It's like, you know, these reports that you read. If you think back to your strategic planning reports, all three of those reports had recommendations at the end. I think 2 of them actually started with the recommendations as well. That's really good. That's really sound technique. Yeah. So see if you can do that, because not only is it a good way to persuade the readers, but it forces a discipline upon you when you're marshalling your evidence, because the only evidence you're going to use is the evidence that supports that conclusion. All good? Yep.
Professor? Professor?
Yes, Sir Haas.
Yeah, I could not get into peer-reviewed publications.
What are they?
Yeah. Peer-reviewed publications means if anyone publishes anything, there must be some review by the peer group, or is it so?
Yeah. So most research is reported in academic journals.
Okay.
To get something published in an academic journal, you have to submit a manuscript which has to get reviewed by your peers. Now, let's just take a topical example that you would understand. I think the British Journal of Medicine is the most authoritative academic journal for medicine in the world. It mightn't be called that. It's British Journal. Anyway, let's say you did some medical research. You would submit it to that journal, and the journal would hand it out. Let's say it was about epidemics. The journal would hand it out to 2 or 3 leading epidemiologists and say to them, please review this. Now, they would not give much attention to what your conclusion was, but they would give a lot of attention to what methods you used, whether those methods were sound from an evidentiary and statistical point and viewpoint. Yeah. So they would, in effect, be your quality assessors. And the tradition that's been built up over a long period of time is that they are hypercritical. Trying to get anything published in an academic journal is really hard and takes a long time and a lot of effort. But thank God it is, because it means when we pick up that journal and we see somebody says Plaquenil will fix this, that we can have some confidence in what they're saying. Not because of who they are, but because of who the people that have reviewed their work are. Now, all these academic journals, they have the different classes, right? There's class A, B, C, D. And that's really not a function of the quality of the articles that appear in them, but a function of the quality of and the rigor of the peer review. Yeah? So if you go to the British Journal of Sociology from many years ago, you'll find an article from me in there that was, I just wanted to kill myself at one point, get it over with. So, no, I've got a few, but anyway, I can tell you now, it's much easier to read and publish a book than it is to publish a 20-page article. I'll give you another example. That one we read by Eaglin. That was, I think, in the Yale Law Review, one of the major universities, might have been Princeton. She, even though that is an outstanding article, it would have taken her 3 months to get that published, at least. Or approved for publication. Then there'd be another 3-6 months for publication. Yeah. So does that answer the question, Suhas?
I got it. Thank you.
Great. Okay. So just back to this point about putting arguments beside each other, we can try and make them as opposite to each other as we can. So the first example here, mandating is justified by saving just one life versus the risk of head injury is so low, it's not sufficient to justify mandating. Incidentally, the resolution of how would you resolve that argument, because as you can see, there's a strong normative element in that. It's not just a matter of numbers. The public value framework's quite good for that, because, you know, you've got the cost of the coercion taken into account. Yeah. Example 2, protection of car occupants is needed to avoid community costs as well as individual costs, but these costs are not sufficient to justify spillover risks of cycling and loss of freedoms. Okay? So simply because we mandate the use of seatbelts and airbags in cars is not sufficient to justify the mandating of cycling helmets. We need to take an evidentiary approach. So they're 2 examples of the kind of tension that you're trying to find between the opposing arguments. And just bear in mind that the readers of your report or your essay, by the way, I'm here to have a bet with you. No, not one of you will get another 5 years in your careers without having to write a report about something. Yeah? So be prepared. And so one good way is to put those things down against each other, look at the evidence and work out what your view is. Okay? And here's just a little process map, right, which all revolves, as you can see, around, here we go, around the thesis statement here. Yeah? Okay. Oops. Right, sorry. Write a first draft. Now, this is really important. Writing is such hard work, isn't it? It's hard work for all of us, right? So we'll do anything to put it off. We'll keep researching. We'll do a few more calculations. We'll do anything to put it off, right? So you need to go to your calendar and you need to find the day and you need to start writing on that day. Doesn't matter what's happened, right? Doesn't matter how little you know, you will start writing on that day. Because in the ultimate, what you're going to be judged on is more your writing than your evidence. And if you put it off and off and off and end up doing it in the last night, you'll be doing yourself a great disservice. So make an appointment with yourself to start writing, right? And the fact that all the research hasn't been done, too bad. Yeah? Once you start writing, as we all know, once you start, it gets easier, right? But it's just like, you know, getting in the pool when the weather's cold. Diving in's the hard bit. Yeah? Don't worry about the referencing and the grammar even. Just get it down. You can come back and fix that. right? Do worry about being creative and make sure to state your conclusion first. Yeah. Brainstorming, right? Brainstorming. As you're reading things, ideas are occurring to you. Don't lose them. Keep a little pad or some sort of note system, right? And just come back to them. Keep reading. And even when you're writing, do the same thing. You'll find when you start writing, new ideas come to you. Get them down. Yeah? But don't lose the central thrust. Just keep them in the notes, come back to them. Yeah? Okay. Right. Now, some writing tips. And I've got good writers here, so I probably don't need to spend a lot of time on them, right? For the most part, 1 verb per sentence, not 2, and definitely not 0. Every sentence deserves a verb, all right? Now, another one is no more than 30 words in each sentence. Lots and lots of the writing I see is people have an afterthought. So what they do is they put and, blah, 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 right? Forget it. Stop it. Put a full stop in. If the point's worth making, it's worth it having its own sentence. Yeah? Start sentence with the subjects. That's amazing. See the second dot point there? It was found that after the main shock, several smaller movements continued to occur, right? Look at the sentence above it. Several smaller movements continued to occur after the main shock. It is obvious that the first sentence is a better sentence. So why do we write the second sentence? Simple, because that's the way our brains work. Yeah? When you're doing your writing your first draft, put down the second sentence. But when you come back, fix it up. Yeah? Look, there's lots and lots of sentences that are like that. 1 point per paragraph, right? No James Joyce's here. Yeah? No stream of consciousness, just 1 point per paragraph. 300 words will see there's more than enough. Okay? Use lots of connecting devices to compare, to contrast, to conclude. Those connecting devices force a discipline on you. What is the relevance of this sentence? If I can't use a connecting device, if it doesn't make sense, then probably that sentence belongs somewhere else. Yeah? We'll come back, be tough on adjectives and adverbs. We'll talk about that, and we'll make the verbs do the work. That's the hardest bit in writing. Once you can get that, well, I'll save it up. Okay, make the verbs do the work. This is a photograph of a famous, you guessed it, Irish revolutionary named Michael Collins. And this is a famous tale about the day he died, right? Let's have a look at the verbs, which are in red, and how much work they do. And let's have a look at the adjectives, which are in blue, okay? The curlew, that's a sort of bird, stood silent and unseen in the long, damp grass. And he looked down on the road below him. He heard the young men shouting and cursing, running backward and forward, dodging, weaving and ducking the bullets. See how those verbs are working there? Dodging, weaving and ducking. Right? Now, a lesser writer would say getting out of the way of bullets. See how it doesn't have anything like the same meaning. Yeah? And see how he's not having to use adjectives to describe this. It's the verbs that are doing. Rain down on them from the hill opposite, right? They didn't come down from the hill opposite. They rained down on the hillside opposite, yeah? And just as quickly as it started, the firing stopped. And a terrible silence. Now, there's an adjective that works, isn't there? Right? Terrible silence. It says so much more than silence. Yeah? A lone figure, another adjective that works, a lone figure. You could just as easily say a figure, but we wouldn't have the descriptive picture without that adjective, would we? Yeah? A lone figure lay on the roadside in the drizzling August rain. Now, a lesser writer would have just said in the August rain. No? Dressed in green greatcoat, leggings and brown hobnail boots that would never again set the sparks flying from the kitchen flagstones as he danced his way through a half set So in other words, he's dancing with his wife in the kitchen, right? So he set the sparks flying. It's a beautiful verb there, yeah? A hurried, whispered act of contrition, yeah? Not just an act of contrition, a hurried, whispered one. And the firing breaks out again. Candles dripping blood, they place beside your shoulders. The curlew takes to flight. Not the curlew flies away, the curlew takes to flight as he flies out over the empty, sad fields of West Cork. With his lonesome call, he must tell the world that the big fella has fallen and that Michael is gone. Now, it's a wonderful piece of writing. Yeah. Now, unfortunately, the kind of reports that you and I have to write do not value that form of writing, yes, but you can save it up for another day. You'll have a reason to write like that someday, yeah? But here we've got lyrical writing, which is why I chose the Irish thing, because they're very good at the lyrical writing and the lyrical talking. Okay, now, there were some very nice adjectives there, right? But not all adjectives are nice. And the worst ones are the ones that are not needed, right? So your adjectives and your adverbs are privileged to be in your report. Have they earned that privilege? Do they do their work? So let's have a little look. Here's a paragraph. Students arriving at Carnegie Mellon University in Australia quickly come to realise that they need to carefully, right, the adjectives are in green, carefully plan their studies to get the most from the very significant learning experiences they face. One of their first tasks is to understand that they must always attend classes punctually. This means they soon find they are always learning in groups, placing their interpersonal skills under very great stress. However, this group work can also be immensely satisfying as solid relationships develop into a strong sense of collective purpose. All right, here we go. Let's begin with the adverbs. Which adverbs can we get rid of there? Which aren't earning their keep? Well, okay. Quickly is earning its keep, right? That gives us a sense of urgency, yeah? Is carefully earning its keep? I'm not so sure, right? They need to plan their studies. Doesn't sort of, if you need to plan your studies, doesn't that imply you need to take care? So I'm not sure about that one. They must always attend classes punctually. What do you think? I don't think the first always adds anything, right? No one's suggesting you have to attend classes punctually, but only sometimes. Yeah. They soon find that they are always learning in groups. That always adds absolutely nothing. It's probably untrue anyway. Yeah. However, this group work can also be immensely satisfying. Does that add anything? Yeah. So this is the thought processes we need to go through. Let's do the adjectives to get the most from the very significant learning experiences they face. Well, let's take the first of them. What's very add? Anything? No, that's one that can go in the bin straight away. Significant. Well, you'd hope the learning experiences were significant, but I guess it adds something. Yeah? Not much, right? Placing their interpersonal skills. Well, that does add something because it could be their numeric skills or their literary skills or what, their research skills or whatever. So it actually provides a descriptor. Yeah? As solid relationships develop. Does the solid, well, as shouldn't be coloured, but does the solid add anything? It's debatable, I think. Yeah. Strong sense of collective purpose. Well, strong, do we need strong? And collective. Sense shouldn't be in blue. Collective purpose. To my mind, those adjectives do add something, so I'd probably keep them in. But what we kick out and what we don't kick out is less important than you guys understanding the thought process that needs to be applied. So I promise you now, if you do the hard work and get the verbs to do the work, and you look critically at your use of adjectives and adverbs, you will be an even finer writer. Yeah? Okay. Now let's have a look. Here's an extract from a fine document. And what we can see here, without going through the same thing, is that this is from the Australian government. If you look at these adjectives here, you'll find every one of them does something. The Australian government writing does not allow for any superfluous words. So, there's to be regulated affected individuals of an eligible data breach, right? So we're not saying all data breaches, they have to be defined as eligible under the law. So that adds something, yeah? The bill contains general rules for the majority of entities. So it doesn't contain specific rules, that's telling us something, as well as analogous rules for credit reporting bodies. So that tells us that it's not the same rules for them, but similar rules, yeah? Credit providers are subject to specific regulations, so that contrasts with the general rules previously, which deals with consumer credit reporting. Well, if we didn't have consumer there, it would have a very different meaning, right? Each type of entity is subject to similar requirements, so they're saying that not everyone's subject to identical requirements, yeah? And from unauthorised access. So see there, that's an example of 3 paragraphs where the adjectives are all at work. They're all doing some work. Yeah? Get the picture? So if you contrast that with the paragraph about CMU that we just looked at a moment ago, where some of the adjectives and some of the adverbs weren't doing any work, you can see the difference. This is the style of writing that you need to use in official type documents. Yeah? There's one other thing that we need to add, and this is really important. The third thing, right? Verbs at work, adjectives and adverbs that actually serve a purpose, right? And a really important point is this. Where you make a claim like this, the United States and UK have had very different patterns of growth to Australia over recent decades. You do not go on with your commentary. You have made a claim which is testable. You immediately establish the strength, the veracity of that claim. You don't wait around, don't come back to it later. Yeah, you'll find in all good government writing that this is the case, that the claim is supported immediately by the evidence. Now, it might be that whatever the claim is requires lots and lots of evidence, in which case you've got to defer some of it for later. But the minute you make a statement like this, it needs substantiation. It also needs a reference. I'll come back to that. Yeah? Okay, so now you've got the 3 things that are important. Substantiate an argument immediately. Make the verbs do the work and make the adjectives and adverbs work. Right. I can, you guys don't suffer from this so much. This is people who struggle with their writing a bit. They struggle with the articles of speech, right? That first sentence there's got just the red bits of the articles of speech. Some people leave them out, but you guys don't suffer from that. There's some descriptors about it. Count and non-count nouns, that can be quite tricky, and articles of speech, right? Basically, count nouns it can be either singular or plural, whereas non-count nouns are always singular. So we don't say the water has been spilled on the table. We can say that, but we cannot say a water has been spilt onto the table. Yeah. But we can say there has been a drop of water or 2 or more drops of water, right, on the table. I'm going to hurry through this. You can look that up later if you want, right? Collective nouns. You don't use plurals when you have collective nouns, right? So we don't have a flocks of birds or flocks of birds. We have a flock of birds. Yes. We have a team of players. We don't have teams of players. Move on. Right. Now, referencing. I've spoken to you about this before, but referencing, it's important to get it right. And there's an easy way of getting it right. And it grieves me to say this, but actually Google Scholar provides a slightly better service than CMU libraries. So if you've got something and you can't find the way to cite it, and you've used it from somewhere else, go and find it on Google Scholar. Because even if you can't access it, if you use this little fellow down here, right, it will give you the citation. Yeah? So, sorry. Yeah. And when it does that, the way it comes up is it looks like this, right? Now, for most places, it doesn't matter which one you use, but you must use the same one every time. Yeah. So me, I use Harvard, which is second from the bottom there. And most of the places I've published, I've used Harvard. Yeah. Chicago is the one where you have the referencing at the footnote at the bottom. But you still need a reference list at the end, by the way, Chicago. But my advice would be to use either APA or Harvard. Okay. So that's a bit of a shortcut rather than my way of doing it manually. The other thing you need to think about is when do I need to reference? Yeah. And almost always, if we go back to that one from the Australian government, that the government doesn't have to do that, but that's the type of document where you have to, where something, you're saying Australia and the US went down different pathways, right? You don't have to reference that. That's an opinion. But remember what we're saying? Immediately, you've got to support it. That's when you have to be thinking about using your referencing. Yeah? Last 2 slides. One is how to manage your time, right? Now, this is quite an important slide because we don't do this at CMU because we don't do enough of this sort of stuff. Although this will be helpful to you for when you do the dreaded system synthesis. Rachel gets to do it with someone else. You other guys, you've got the misery of having to do it with me. So the referencing will be absolutely right. But here's quite a good guide about if you've got a report which system synthesis, it's about anything short of 10,000 words. So you're going to need, you've got plenty of time actually, because you've got a 14-week semester. So you should be looking to use all the 14 weeks, spend 7 weeks at least on research and analysis, a quarter of the time on drafting and a quarter of the time on referencing, editing, revising, proofreading, but not necessarily in that order, right? We talked about reading before, yeah? Now, lucky last, here's some final tips for you, right? Research. Researching is an art. Yeah, really good researchers think creatively about where to go and look. Yeah? It's not just a matter of getting the topic, sticking it in CMU libraries and seeing what comes up. It's more of a detective thing. You follow the trail. The CMU library's got a really good function. I don't know if you've used it yet, but if you do, you'll find that it's got another column. When you access a journal article, it's got another column saying other similar articles are these. Yeah, have a look at it. You know, just use the researching creatively. We've just spoken about knowing when to reference. I cannot have this little talk without mentioning what I've mentioned to you a million times before. Write for the intelligent but uninformed. If you do that, you will be a sensational public policy writer. Yeah? To do that, right, try your reports out on someone who is intelligent but uninformed. If you're writing about energy policy, there's a lot of people who don't know about energy policy. So let's just say you were writing to the Philippines cabinet. You know, you've got all the secretaries sitting around, you're writing to them about energy policy. Most of them wouldn't know the first thing about it. But they're not stupid people either. Yeah? So how do you write for them? Testing out on others is a good one, right? Begin writing early, right? Now, something I will confess to finding personally very difficult is as we write, as we prepare our report, some of our research becomes casualties. It no longer is really that relevant. It was great when we did it. We were really chuffed by it, but now we find it doesn't actually support it. It really hurts, but you've got to cut it out. Remove it, right? Something gets, you know, that saying about things on the cutting room floor, some things just have to end up on the cutting room floor, right? And finally, you know, when you hear some people say, oh, but I'm a terrible writer, Tim, I think immediately, no, that's not true. That means that you just haven't given writing the effort that you give to something that's a bit easier, like regression calculations. Yeah. Compared to writing, that stuff's a walk in the park, right? So just give writing the attention it deserves. So that's it. Any comments or anything? I hope you found it useful.
Can I ask a question, Tim?
Yeah.
About referencing. I get referencing when you're using a peer-reviewed article that has an author and has a date published in a journal that it's in. For example, if you're using, like recently for one of my classes, I used like the UN's Food and Agriculture Organization, just like data, like they published statistics about the amount of like, it was like the amount of different types of food aid shipped to least developed countries, like whatever, but it was just like an Excel spreadsheet basically. So it wasn't in an article, it didn't have an author, and I wasn't really sure, like it was missing if I was going to use, for example, like Harvard referencing. I didn't have like a lot of the criteria that needs to be used for Harvard referencing. So what?
Yeah, no, that's an excellent question. It's helpful for these purposes to think about primary and secondary research. That table that you're talking about, Rachel, is primary research. That's data that someone's gathered. There's no way anyone can review that, although, you know, the stronger the source, the more authority it has. So every country that's in this discussion has a national statistics bureau, for instance. Yeah? So the fact it simply comes from that bureau, that's sufficient. Secondary research is where the data has been analysed by somebody and an argument presented. This is where the quality control comes in. So in a sense, if there's needed to be a quality control, that's when to reference, which generally is the distinction between primary and secondary research.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, yeah, thank you.
And then there's other things, you know, like from time to time, it's unavoidable. You need to quote newspapers and things like that. Yeah. It's really a judgment call as to whether you do that. I tend to, but I over reference. It's not always necessary. And, you know, we don't need to reference that Chamberlain said peace in our time, or, you know, Romeo said, or Juliet said, Romeo, Romeo, wherefore art thou? We don't need to reference that. Everyone knows that. Comes from Act 3, Jaoué, scene. Romeo, Romeo, wherefore art thou? What act from Romeo and Juliet is that from? No, it's all right. I'm only teasing. You don't have to know that. Oh, well, here's an easy one. Now is the winter of our discontent. That's easy. That's Act 1, Scene 1 from Richard II. Yeah. So that's an easy one. Okay. Anything else? Darwin.
Yeah, I have a question about you have a previous slide on listing down all the arguments for and against your position.
Yeah.
And I've tried doing that on a few papers before. The idea was to also present the arguments against my position so that I could maybe recommend like how to address all of these issues.
Yeah.
But the thing that happened is that it came off as like a bit I was arguing against myself. So do you have any tips for
Yeah,
managing?
I do. I'm sorry. Thank you for that, because I should have mentioned it. The ability to present eloquently the argument that's contrary to your argument is a sign of a credible, strong argument. It is indispensable to a really strong argument. Yeah? And so we need to do 2 or 3 things. First of all, we need to represent the argument, the contrary argument, faithfully. And for that, we need to reference, right? We must not paraphrase it in a way that makes it easy for us to argue against. We must reference it faithfully. To overcome the problem you're talking about is we need some connections that say something like, these arguments are strong in this sense, but weak in this sense. What we don't need, we need to be highly specific. What we don't need is we don't need some general throwaway line like, these are strong arguments, but are not as strong as the arguments of the other side. That's just a matter of opinion. You haven't proved that to anybody, right? You're simply asking them to accept your judgment as being superior to theirs. To the readers, that is. So we need to marshal it as well as we possibly can. And here, I don't like to use many direct quotes, but if I'm assembling arguments from the other side to convince the reader that I'm presenting them faithfully, I do quite often use direct quotes. Yeah. But so long as you make it plain that this is a set of arguments that you're presenting with which you do not agree, and here's your reasons for not agreeing them, that's the second half of that sentence that's important there. Yeah?
Right, thanks.
No worries. We all done? Okay, it's lunchtime. Miss you guys. See you soon, I hope. Okay. Bye.
Thank you, Dave.
Bye, thanks.
Thank you.
Bye, thanks,
Thank you.
team.
Bye.